You are now live. Thank you. Hello and welcome to the organizational meeting of the Joint Legislative Management Committee. For the record, Betsy Ann Resk, Clerk of the House, and just here to get you started. In the absence of a chair, this committee elects its own chair and vice chair. So our first order of business is the election of a chair, and nominations for chair are now in order. Madam Speaker.
Thank you. I would like to nominate Pro Tem Baruch as chair of the committee.
Speaker Kroinski has nominated President Pro Tem Baruch as chair of the committee. Are there any other nominations? There being no other nominations, without objection, I will now take the vote by voice vote. The question is, shall the committee elect President Pro Tem Baruch as chair? Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please say nay. Ayes appear to have it. Ayes do have it, and President Pro Tem Baruch is elected as chair. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you all. Next order of business is electing a vice chair of the committee, and I nominate Speaker Joe Kowinski as vice chair. To accept a nomination. Are there any other nominations? There being no other nominations, without objection, I will take the vote by voice vote. Question is, shall the committee elect Speaker Kowinski as vice chair? Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say nay. The ayes have it. The ayes do have it. Speaker Kowinski is elected vice chair. So with that out of the way, we'll turn to our substantive agenda. And that's, first of all, we wanted to get an overview of the JLMC statute for the benefit of new members to the committee. And I believe Secretary Bloom is going to do that via Zoom. Are you there, Secretary?
I believe I'm here. Am I there?
Oh, you sound like you.
This is the best. This is the best day, Senator. I mean, it's been really most interesting. I haven't been this sick in 40 years. So I will give you that. Actually, that'll benefit you because I'll get tired within 5 minutes. So you won't get a long speech. That's why we put it in for five total minutes. I'm going to give you the 90,000 foot look, not the 30,000, the 90,000 foot. So there's going to be a lot of details that may be missing, but if you have questions, just make sure you ask me. So generally, as you all know, there are really sort of three branches of government. There's a legislature, there's an executive, and then there's a judiciary. The legislature is unique in that there are two chambers, at least in most states, other than I think Nebraska. And so that they have some common things that they have to deal with. And so like in the building, there are what happens, the relationships between the two chambers, what happens with the sergeant at arms, or what happens with sort of joint employees, which I'm going to get into in a second. Some states actually go and have a separate whole series of employees for the Senate and a whole series of employees for the House. That includes everything from sergeant at arms to drafting staff to committee assistants. Vermont chose a quite a bit different type tactic, and they basically have joint employees other than the House clerk office, which is elected by the 150 members of the House and basically answers to the House Rules Committee and the actual 150 members. It's the same in the Senate, and they basically are sort of overseen by their two respective chambers. I'll get back in a second to how some of the stuff that's happened in the last few years still applies to those two chambers. But the reason for it, of course, is joint management, as an example, with senators on it, can't really discipline or set policy for the House Clerk's office, nor can the House members on this committee set policy for the Senate Secretary's office. That really stands within the two unique chambers under the terms of the Constitution. So the state of Vermont, long ago, basically has one sergeant at arms, and that sergeant at arms is elected in a joint assembly, and they have employees. Similarly, there's a legislative council back a long time ago, back in the 1940s or 50s. It was draft people. That was eventually repealed. There was a couple different iterations. Eventually, I think it was 72, there was a legislative council. Back then it was spelled CIL because it was a council of people, not actually council like lawyers. And they basically did the staffs for the legislative branch, the common ones. Similarly with joint fiscal, I think was enacted somewhere around 73. And they're a unique, they have their own joint fiscal committee, which hires the person, sets policies. Same idea with the legislative council. And so those are joint employees that have generally had separate little oversights. And what happened over time was that as the employees expanded, and numbers of employees expanded. Each of the different offices expanded. There was some restructuring done, and that began looking at it in the 2019, 20, over that time period. And so what happened was that there were some times where there was inconsistencies between the two different sets of offices. Joint fiscal may be doing one thing for policies, ledge counsel may be doing another, the sergeant at arms may be doing a third. And so what joint management does is it oversees all the common employees. You look at it as setting policies for the common employees. You look at setting a budget for the common employees. You look at sort of the pay. I can give you more detail on it, but that's really what your job is. You don't do what the joint rules does, which is sort of a United Nations between the two different chambers, but they also control the joint rules controls the common areas. Like in the hallways, you'll remember, those of you who've been there for a while, back when we had the pandemic, what was allowed in the building and the common areas was done through joint rules. Within the committees themselves, the committee rooms, the House takes care of their committee rooms, what's allowed and what's not, and same idea with the Senate. So the Joint Management Committee is really a committee that oversees the common employees. The one sort of exception I mentioned earlier was the clerk in the House, the clerk in the Secretary's office. We basically adopt those rules and regulations and the pay study as it's applicable to our offices. So there's still some consistency across all the branch, but we do it not through joint management, but we do it through our individual rules committee. So that's a basic overview. Your functions are to take a look at, as I say, the management of the common employees.
Thank you so much, Mr. Secretary. Any questions for John? Senator Clark.
John, what is our total number currently of those joint employees?
I'm not going to be able to answer that. And I'm sorry about that. The other thing I should mention, I'm sort of changing time. What happened when the joint management was also started? There's a human resources department now, and they split out IT, so you have more little fingers that you oversee. You have directors that run each of your different offices, and you oversee the officers. You don't necessarily have to oversee the offices. That's the job of the directors. And if there's a problem, the directors are supposed to take care of it, kind of move up through it. And then you're sort of like a board of directors. They don't bring you up. They shouldn't be bringing you up daily problems, but you're setting overall policy for the legislature. I don't know. There's probably somebody in the room, maybe.
You may have the answer to that.
Yeah, there's a total of about 110 staff, full-time, part-time, 0, and seasonal.
And that does or doesn't include the secretary and the clerk's office.
That does include.
So 110?
Approximately.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Secretary. We'll let you, if you choose, to turn your camera off and just listen more comfortably. And thank you for that. So next we'll turn to the compensation study and ask Arlene to come up. If you want to bring others up, feel free. And I assume you'll maybe give us a little history of how we got here.
Yes, we're definitely going to do that. Thank you. So good afternoon, everyone. I'm Arlene Donovan, HR Director for the General Assembly. Nice to see all of you. I'm here with all of the office directors, or almost all of them, including Secretary Bloomer on Zoom, because we have all been working in collaboration on a proposal regarding the staff compensation and organizational structure. And that's what we're going to be talking to you about today. So Bryn and Betsy and I are going to walk you through just a short slide presentation, a handful of slides, and then we will welcome your questions. We're going to start off with a history of compensation work, our current status, and then our proposal for moving forward.
Okay.
So actually, 1 second. Thanks, Krista. Yeah, let's throw it up here. And then we could just move forward one quickly, that would be great. Thank you. So like Secretary Bloomer was talking about, back in 2019, things were a little bit different than they are today. So NCSL at that time came in and they conducted a study of the legislative staff. And one of the things that they looked at was compensation and made recommendations regarding the compensation for the staff at that time. What they recommended was that a compensation structure be developed and put into place across all of the offices, and that the individual employees on staff, their salaries would be also looked at and then properly placed within the structure that was created. Because as Secretary Wimmer referenced, things were, they were not consistent at that point in time. The individual offices were sort of running independently regarding pay practices, policies, and so forth. And the goal really was to provide some consistency and equity, really, regarding the pay practices across all of the staff offices. So in 2022, we retained NCSL to create that compensation structure. So that's exactly what they did. It was the first kind of pay structure ever here at the General Assembly. It was a very collaborative process. It involved all the staff. It involved all of the directors. It took place over the course of many months. And it was really a lot of work. They reviewed all of the updated position descriptions. They went out to the market, did a full market analysis of comparable jobs across organizations and legislatures in the nation. And then they created a pay grade and salary range for all of our position titles here at the legislature. And at the same time, we also retained a compensation consultant. And that consultant was hired to do the second piece of the NCSL recommendation, and that was to look at all of the individual staff salaries and to make sure that they were properly placed within that compensation structure that NCSL created for us. So that work was done. It provided a very solid jumping off point for our compensation. And it also gave us the ability to right-size all of the staff salaries that were below what we call below market. So we were able to identify who was paid below the market, and we were fortunate enough to be able to bring them all up to market so that everybody was paid competitively and equitably across the branch.
Okay, so I'll take it from here. Just for the record, Bryn Hare, Director and Chief Counsel of Legislative Council. And this slide gives a bit of a picture of where we are now, now that you have the history of where we've been. So essentially, periodic review of an organization's compensation structure is really a best practice. It gives an organization the opportunity to compare salaries in the office to industry benchmarks to identify any discrepancies. It ensures that there's a continual process for maintaining internal equity among employees who are doing similar jobs, and also adequate compensation for employees who are doing different type of work or additional work. It's also important to maintain competitive pay with opportunities for advancement. That's really important for retention of employees. So this committee, the Joint Legislative Management Committee, did have the foresight to adopt a policy that addresses this periodic review. So in October of 2022, this committee adopted a policy called the Position Reclassification and Allocation Policy. I actually brought copies. I think that they were shared ahead of time as well, but for you to take those. The actual policy provides that a formal review of the pay structure and placement of positions within that structure will take place approximately every 3 years. So this committee did think about that periodic review and making sure that it was done. So that now that we've had the internal pay structure that was created sort of through NCSL and the work that was done in 2022, staff have identified some areas that would benefit from a reassessment. And like Arlene noted earlier, that sort of initial assessment that created the internal equity is somewhat of a rigid structure. So one of the opportunities that staff have identified is an opportunity for some sort of a structure that's created for career progression among existing staff. Also, a review of existing positions to ensure that we've properly graded the positions. Are the titles appropriate? Have we placed them appropriately within the organizational structure? And also to ensure that we are still competitive in the pay that we provide. There's constant fluctuations in the market, so doing a periodic assessment of that is really important. And also, just as I mentioned earlier, to ensure that we are maintaining pay equity. Now, having said all that, NCSL is no longer conducting that compensation study work. So we had to go elsewhere, look elsewhere for that external expertise. You can go to the next slide.
Thank you. Great. So I just want to emphasize that we as directors have regular meetings and we're very happy to work together. We're a really cohesive group and just really appreciate all my colleagues working on this issue and other issues affecting us and staff. So when we were pursuing the JLMC directive to continuously review our pay structure, and we determined that we needed to engage in it again in accordance with your policy, we engaged in a public RFP process, and we held a lot of meetings and discussions about the potential vendors. We reviewed vendors together, and we obtained vendor presentations that we received as a group. And we have recommended, pursuant to those meetings, Arthur J. Gallagher to conduct the following work. And we provided a list for you here. They would study the current organizational compensation structure that we have. They would review current strategies and methods for compensation decisions. They'd review and analyze our positions, their titlings, the groupings, exemptions, and equity, which was something that we had focused on. Suggest the methods for career progression, as Bryn just mentioned. They'd collect market data, benchmark positions, and analyze internal salaries, make recommendations. They present to leadership and to you, JLMC. They issue a final report, and they train staff and supply some maintenance tools. And we're also recommending that Arthur J. Gallagher provide some ongoing support to help us as necessary in the compensation space. So Arthur J. Gallagher is a longstanding consulting organization. They're well known in the compensation solution space. They have experience with compensation structures like ours and have conducted similar work in other organizations. Much of their work is in the public sector. That's something that we focused on so that they understand the work that we do. And our lead on this project is also managing director of organizations public sector work. So that is a large focus that they have. We conducted 3 reference checks, and all were from the public sector, and they were all very positive. And that is how we would reach that decision as a group, and we are unified in making that recommendation to you today.
Betty, and where are they based?
They're based.
I don't, and I could easily find out. Actually, I may have it.
Okay, and I'm just curious, when it talks about training staff and supply of maintenance tools, would we be developing a tool that we can keep on top, keep ourselves updated without having to spend $92,000 every 3 years? I mean, is that going to be, I would hope that that would be a piece of it, that they would give us a tool that we can do our own assessment and updating and maintaining equity on our own without having to go through this every 3 years, because this is just curious, is that one of the maintenance tools we talked about?
So they will be providing us with maintenance tools that we can do a lot more than we are able to do now. The recommendation still would be to not conduct a study such as this one, not as extensive as this, but to at least look at the market data every 3 or so years. Just to make sure that our structure is still aligned with competitive pay rates in the market. But I don't anticipate that we would need to look at career progression and all of these other things that we've identified as areas for, for a need to reassess at this point.
And when you talk about him working at this firm, working with us to oversee its implementation, I assume that the fee that they're charging would take us through that next 3 years without additional cost.
So the fee that they are charging us should bring us through the next 3 years, yes. What we're also suggesting, though, is that we retain them or have them on retainer, so to speak, on an annual basis to help us with some of the compensation challenges that we might come across, that we sometimes do come across in this environment.
And just to clarify and make sure if I'm understanding, it says here that 7 months would complete the phases of this. I read that to be, that's the 92,000. And then to continue beyond 7 months, it would be 12,500
Yes.
A year?
That's correct.
per year.
It would be the 12,500 would be an annual cost to keep them on.
Right. So in other words,
them.
the 92,000 isn't for 3 years.
Ah.
It's for the 7-month study, and then we pay per.
That's correct. But the work that they are doing should bring us through the next 3 years. Sorry if I was.
Okay.
Rep Wood.
So I don't, in theory, don't have any issues with the concept. I'm just wondering, it seems a little bit like we're asking them to do the exact same things that we asked NCSL to do 3 years ago, and why were we redoing the entire package as opposed to, maybe addressing some of the things that we might need to address that we have learned in the last 3 years since implementing a, more unified compensation practice.
So we're not asking them to, and we don't actually want them to reconstruct or give us a new structure. We are happy with the structure that we have and the grading system. They use something called point factoring to create our structure, and we are actually all satisfied with that structure. So we're not looking for a new structure. But in the current structure, there are pieces that we know need to be looked at. Career progression is one thing. It's a compressed structure. So there really isn't any room to add pay grades so that if somebody was to be promoted or if they took on a new position or new work, there really isn't a place to put people. So that's one thing that we need them to assess. The other thing that we would ask them to do and would ask of any compensation structure that we have is to go out to the market to make sure that our pay, that our salaries are still competitive. Very important for recruiting, very important for retention. Because if we start falling behind with our salaries, we won't be able to bring talent into the legislature. And it's not hard to have competing organizations with the other branches and the other agencies and whatnot that are right here in our own backyard. Some of the other things that we are looking and asking for them to do is to really take a look at the positions now from a different lens, because we know, now that we've had a chance to work with this structure for the last 3 years, we know that there are positions that may need reevaluation. They may have been placed originally in this grade, but maybe because of the work that they're doing or because of the work that other people in the branch are doing, it may not be as equitable as we originally thought. So there are some positions that we believe should be reevaluated and perhaps placed in a different spot on the structure. So it seems like it is the same work, and I think to some degree it's similar work, but I think really what it is a closer, finer look at the work that's already been given to us so that we can just ensure that we are competitive in the market and that we have progression and the ability to allow our staff to grow in the current structure that we have right now.
So in the market analysis, will they be looking at states of comparable size? I mean, comparing Vermont to California, for instance, and people doing similar work is not really realistic. And so I'm just interested in what kind of sort of guidance that you would expect to be giving them.
Yes, so for sure, we here do not have access to market data, which is one of the reasons why we need someone with this expertise and who has access to all of this information that we just don't have access to help us. So they absolutely, this is part of the work that they do. They will always look at like size organizations, like size legislatures. We will ask them to go to other legislatures, as NCSL did, to try to find comparable positions to compare our positions with. So they definitely should not be using market information that is not, comparable to our work here or comparable to the size of the organization here. That's, standard in their work. Hopefully we highly anticipate that that's what they're going to do for us. Yeah.
Other questions? Was that all you wanted to give us?
We just had a couple of more slides, and I think we were referencing the timeline. So how long will this take? The work will start 2 weeks after we have a signed contract in place, and then it's expected to take, like you were saying, Senator Ruth, about 7 months to complete the work without a break in the work. So if there's some unanticipated reason why we would need to stop the work and restart it, that timeline would be extended. But a lot of us here were involved the first time around. We know what is required to get this work done. All of the directors have committed to doing the work. So we're looking at about 7 months. The costs are here. So the $92,000, I was rounding up a little bit, but the $92,000 is what's estimated to conduct the work, as we were just talking about, that they have outlined in their RFP. And then that $12,500 is the additional cost per year for that ongoing support that we were talking about.
Yes.
Yeah, so for the ongoing support, I wonder if you could just clarify what that would look like. As you mentioned, like things that pop up, but if you could just, and is it automatically billed, or is it would just be billed as it comes up? So there might be a year where you don't use any of it.
It is automatically billed, built in and billed to us. The work that we anticipate it is as it pops up. I don't anticipate that we would need to reach out to them every single time we had a compensation question, but the work that we do here is unique. Our job titles are very unique, and things fluctuate and change all the time. So on occasion, there will be a pay matter that comes up. The directors all, as Betsy Ann was saying, we all collaborate together. And there are oftentimes multiple ways to resolve a compensation situation. But there are a lot of times where we would benefit from having an expert on hand to help guide some of these decisions that we have to make. And a couple of other reasons why I think it is important to have somebody accessible to us is that they will have their thumb on the market, that information that we don't have access to. So if something does change in the compensation world, they will let us know. And that will help us stay aligned, and it also will help to keep us equitable, which helps us to mitigate the risk that we could potentially face if we are not maintaining equity in the compensation. So there are oftentimes things will come up. These are also, compensation is very personal to people. Some of these discussions that we have are very personally charged, and sometimes they're complicated, honestly. And I think it would benefit all of us if we had someone to reach out to just to say, hey, are we on the right track? Is this something that will, put us at greater risk? Or if we make a change over in this office, will that impact anyone negatively over in this office? And sometimes it's obvious, and sometimes it's not as obvious.
Senator Fox.
Thanks. I hadn't appreciated that this came with this additional retainer fee. And I'm just curious, and may have some suggestions at our next meeting. Is this $12,500 open for other issues that are related to compensation in the building that we might ask this firm to look at later? I mean, this is a fairly sizable retainer. So I assume that other things could be entertained within.
So the proposal that we sent out publicly was for just staff compensation. So we have not asked them about anything else outside of the staff. So I don't know that I can answer that right now.
And I don't want to speak for others. My assumption when I look at that 12,500 retainer, it is to update the work that they've done on staff compensation as we go forward So if we were to entertain
Something else.
auxiliary or unrelated items, that would have to be its own thing. Okay, so, oh, I'm sorry, Senator Lyons.
Oh, quick question, because I went ahead to your next slide. And you indicate that the compensation work and ongoing support for the year following completion. So does that imply that there would be $12,500 that we would be voting on for this time? And then next year voting for the retainer again, or once you vote for the whole thing, you get a retainer until you say stop?
So we were asking for the retainer for this coming year,
Yeah.
once the work is completed.
So it's just 1 year.
So it's not a commitment for 3 years at
We don't have to,
12,000.
no, the 12,500 is annually. We don't have to make a commitment beyond that year.
So 104.5.
Yeah, it's 37.5 plus. I mean, if we,
No, so 92,
yeah, plus 12.
Ripley.
So I'm just curious if this was budgeted in either FY 25 or 26.
So Catherine, Madam the Fiscal Office, the ongoing retainer was budgeted. The one time was not in the budget, and we have a proposal. There are some one-time funds that were not spent that were actually given to the Joint Fiscal Office that could be, that particular task force didn't happen, so money was appropriated for that, and so that we would suggest, if you wanted to move forward this, that we would put some language in the budget or budget adjustment, reframing what those funds could be used in for this compensation study. But just to be clear again, the 12.9 is in the current budget that is now the governor's recommend.
Speaker Kronski.
Oh, did you have a follow-up?
Well, I guess I'm a little bit unclear. I mean, I understand your explanation, but I'm just trying to figure out why that money wouldn't have been reverted in the budget.
So we have a policy where we keep money for 2 years before we revert it. So that money, if we don't spend it on this, will be reverted in the next budget process. It would come up in that process and would be reverted then.
Okay, so 2 years.
Kronski.
So I've been part of JLMC from the time where we started working with NCSL on this journey. And I will say, having seen this process play out, it has been so critical for our staff, and having really bring an equitable process together where we have a foundation for compensation is so important. I'm really proud to see the way we've been working to make sure that there's equity across all the different departments. And so I think we now have this foundation that we've been working off of from NCSL. I'm disappointed that we can't use their services to do it again and that that's not available. But I think it's important for us to maintain this and to keep it going. And some of the feedback that I've heard from staff wanting to grow and wanting to achieve different goals within their different offices. And this helps us create more structure for that to happen, which is really great. And I think it just helps with the development of our organization and helps promote staff growth and retention. So just to keep this conversation going, I'd like to make a motion to retain Arthur J. Gallagher for both compensation work and the ongoing support for the following year completion.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we need a second? Discussion.
Oh, I will also add that this is common for this type of compensation work to happen. And I do know that in the governor's budget, the administration is doing this for state government. They have money in their own budget to do a compensation review as well. So it's nice that we're on the same path together.
So we can do a voice vote. Yes?
Yeah, and I just like to second, for those of us who lived through the inequities of each fiefdom and how much everybody paid, one of the joys of having JLMC now in place and having this compensation equity, it's critically important. And it's not that, it's just, I think we're all, particularly given where we are in terms of compensation, it's it's a good sized amount of money. I'm delighted to know that we have it and we have the JFO is always great at finding money that we need, which is always appreciated. I just, I think we applaud the work and it's important and work and we certainly want to invest. I think this is a major investment in our staff who we treasure. So all important.
Thank you. Any other discussion? I don't think it would be a bad idea to call the roll on this. And I know the chair typically does that. I have the roll as listed at the top of our agenda. Not sure if that's in the proper order, but.
Is there a proper order?
Well, yeah.
Does
But I
the
can,
House Clerk have a recommendation?
I think the chair usually votes last.
okay.
I wanted to break the tie.
So with that, said, not hearing
We
further
are
discussion.
7 members.
Representative Kowinski,
Yes.
Representative Dolan,
Yes.
Representative Toof,
Yes.
Representative Good,
Yes.
Senator Clarkson,
Yes.
Senator Beck,
Yes.
Senator Lyons,
Yes.
and Senator Baruth, yes. So that is unanimous, 8-0-0. And thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, we have our Sergeant at Arms here, and she has a number of important updates.
Good afternoon, good evening.
Good afternoon. Don't rush it.
I don't know, I never know. I never know when to stop saying good morning either, so. I do have a few updates and I think Chrissy's working on putting my slides up, but I'll go ahead and get started. I was going to give an update on personnel and on building things. So for personnel, I think there's 3 updates. One, we were fully staffed as a Capitol Police Department for about a few months. And then one of the officers, the newest officer, Maya Wynn, decided that he wanted to go to a part-time basis. So I just wanted to update the group on that. He worked for over 20 years for Burlington Police and thought that the next chapter of his life would have law enforcement in it. And it does on a part-time basis, but he's reevaluating and it was a good parting. But you'll be seeing he's actually here for the budget address, but you won't be seeing him here on a full-time basis. So we're reevaluating and then we'll repost that position. Another update is Martina Mikolova, our visitor services coordinator. She also resigned. She really tried to this is in a lot of ways a dream job for her. She is so great. Moving to Vermont proved to be much more challenging than she had originally anticipated. And so her last day will be next Thursday. And what we're doing is we're going to replace her. Well, there's no replacing her, but we'll try to replace the duties with a temporary position just to get us through session. And then we will recruit for a permanent position. And then lastly, we hired a new doorkeeper. His name is Tom Hardy. You've probably seen him around. I think he's mostly been in the house and I think he's known to many people in the building. And so he's been doing great. So those are our 3 personnel updates from the Sergeant at Arms office.
And this is the person who has given us devotionals over the years.
Yes.
Yes.
He's the minister in Bethel.
Yeah.
Yes. Yep. So moving on to building updates, I think the first update I'd like to give is that one of the House committees moved over the weekend. House Energy and Digital Infrastructure moved from 41 to 32. And I believe it's been a successful move. I haven't had a chance to check in with the chair, but if I haven't heard from her, I believe it's successful. Okay, the speaker's giving me 2 thumbs up. And I really want to say here, thank you so much to Kevin Moore and his IT team who really are, the Sergeant at Arms office gets a lot of credit for building things and it cannot be done without the IT staff, without Mike Metcalf, without Catherine's team, because a lot of it is budget related. And it really does take a lot of people to make it work. So thank you, Kevin, to you and your team for making that happen. And the last update, and Christy, if you wouldn't mind going to the next slide, is the mezzanine. So that is, we had our inspection today. The fire inspector came at 11 o'clock and gave us the thumbs up. So that means we are good to go. We're gonna, after this meeting is over, I'm going over to House Education and starting to move furniture. The picture on the left shows you what it looked like the last time we gave an update in December. Picture on the right was taken about 45 minutes ago. We tried very hard to reuse as much furniture as possible. So like the desk pictured there was the desk in one of the House committee rooms, the whiteboards, the bulletin boards, all reused. It is new carpeting. There are new blinds. There are some things we had to buy, but the project is on budget. I'm happy to report is on budget. And it's expected to stay on budget, and we hope to open on Tuesday. So a couple things about the mezzanine, and I emailed the committees that will be moving in here. It's House Government Operations and House Education. There will still be some punch list items that need to be finished over the next 2 weeks. And the most notably, only one of the restrooms will have a door on it. There's 2 restrooms. And that's because the doors didn't arrive in time. So we're reusing mezzanine office doors to get through at least the first week of being in the suite. So that is, I think, most of the building updates that I wanted to provide, unless there's any questions.
I just wanted to commend you. I know you're properly giving credit elsewhere, and it is a huge team effort, but I've just been super impressed by your focus on that project, keeping it on budget, keeping the timing of it moving along, and you know, knock on wood, there have not been any delays or any work that needed to be undone and redone, and that's all due to your watchful eye. So thank you so much.
It was a very fun first project, a Sergeant at Arms. The building of these committee rooms is very important. There's so much pressure on the building for space, and I'm sure you've all felt it as legislators. For those of you who are chairs of committees, you felt it, or in leadership roles, you felt it. And the use of room 10 and 11 for committees was a very good idea when we needed it. And now that we have those mezzanine committee rooms, or next week when we have them, rooms 10 and 11 can go back to general use, which if you're chairing a committee or on a committee that likes to have hearings, you know, these rooms will provide that opportunity. The pavilion has been a very nice extension of the State House for the last few years, but there are issues with public access to the pavilion. And I would say member access, because getting from point A to point B can be very challenging, especially if there's snow on the ground, or especially for members who have mobility issues. So this will get all of the committees they've always been under one roof, but now even joint 2 committees coming together can meet in the State House. So it'll be very, very nice to have it back.
Any questions for the Sergeant at Arms?
Will the mezzanine now be reopened without having to use your badge?
Yes, so members of the public would access those, I'm calling it the mezzanine suite, or we're calling it the mezzanine suite, the same way they used to access the mezzanine by climbing the stairs and the glass tower, and that door will be propped open. I will just say for the first week, it will be closed because part of that door shipment included a piece of equipment that will keep it open. So for the first week, the door will be closed, but after that, it will be propped open. And then if there was a fire alarm, it would automatically close, just like our other fire doors. Oh, I forgot to mention that. So then that area would be open to the public, and it would be just like accessing like the 30s, you know, or the 40s. There is going to be a hallway off the back side of the committee rooms that leads to private offices. And this is a big, I think, another big benefit of this project is there will be probably 3, possibly even 4 single-use offices that will be available to legislators and staff for reservations. So right now in the building, the only rooms that are reservable are room 47 and room 41. I'm sorry, not 47, 44 and 41. Those are the only 2 rooms, and they are in high demand. I say on average, every single day, we're denying the requests from maybe 5 or 6 legislators that are looking for a private place to meet. So with these 4 new rooms, it will help hopefully take pressure off of legislators finding a place to have a meeting, whether it's about legislative business or personal business, a place to go and have a telehealth appointment or a call to, someone in their personal life. So that will be I'm still working out with Kevin how we're going to reserve those rooms. Room reservations seem like a very simple thing, but for some reason they get very, very complicated. And Donna and Sid handle the brunt of all the room reservations. And I have concerns about adding 4 more rooms onto their already full plate. So Kevin's going to help me find some sort of more automatic or user-friendly reservation system.
Sorry to be asking so many questions today. So I wasn't going to bring it up, but since you did, I am. Room 47.
Yes.
And it being locked for quote unquote leadership, what is a problem. I'm just, there are oftentimes you're not able to schedule a time when you need to have an immediate private meeting with 1 or 2 or 3 people. And frankly, it's not being used, and having it locked all the time is a real problem. So I'm just bringing that up for your further consideration.
Thank you, Representative Wood.
I can take that one. Okay, no, you take that one, because I'm concerned any room in this building is locked.
So there was a request for support for office space from the minority leader and somewhat majority leader in the House. And it's a open room on the 4th in the 40s. So we decided to pile it out and see what it would be like if we set aside a room where leadership knew if they needed to have a tough conversation or a member needed support, that they had a private place to go. And so I think in conversations, there was a request to have access by key, and that's something that we can talk about for sure.
Well, I mean, I would think about at least maybe making one of those soon-to-be private offices in the mezzanine maybe available for one of those uses. Because committees really need to use these other 2 rooms.
One of the beautiful outcomes of the mezzanine project are those 4 single-use offices, which I think now that they're about to be in play will be a very important part of all space conversations. And we will bring some space conversations to this committee, Joint Legislative Management Committee. Typically, it'll be Joint Rules has oversight over, as Secretary Bloomer said, like the common areas and the common rooms. And then Senate Rules has jurisdiction over the Senate committees, House Rules over the House committees. Typically, it's the Sergeant at Arms office in collaboration in conjunction with the directors that make decisions about staff spaces. And so these 4 potentially 4 offices are kind of a new concept. And so it will probably touch on lots of different stakeholders, but they're definitely a benefit to have in the mix.
Okay, thank you so much, Agatha. So that is our declared agenda, but I understand we may have a piece of new business quickly.
I have a new business. Well, yeah, it's gonna be quick because I don't expect a resolution today, but Agatha's very hip to this. We have a page program that has become slowly, and it's something that matters to all of us. We love our pages. It is meant to be an equitable program that any child who's in 8th grade can participate in from no matter where they live. And Agatha and Sid run this terrific program. It has become totally inequitable. It has become a program only available to people whose families can afford to rent either an Airbnb or we've arranged now for legislative rate for the Capitol Plaza for families, but that is inequitable on its face. And I am really urging us to explore, and this is a charge to us all in this room, to figure out a way that we can house our pages in a safe way. We've managed to do it for decades. And we have, so it became an issue, with Janet's, with some things that happened with Janet when Janet was Sergeant at Arms, and we have lost this ability to house them. We need to find it again because this is unacceptable. And so I am going to charge us all to figure out a way to house our pages because it can't just be people who can afford to have their children here.
Or who just live in central Vermont and can commute.
Correct. Or people who can come on a daily basis.
Yeah.
But that means there has to be a parent who's available to bring them. Or, yeah, whatever. So it's become a program that is a little problematic and I've been watching it, you know, Agatha knows it's been a real frustration for me for several years. So.
Okay, and I think that's a great goal for us to have.
Yeah, for us to think about.
And I'm sure Agatha will think about it and propose options to us. Maybe.
We're working on it.
Conversations offline. So thank you, Senator. Any other new business? All right, I just wanted to welcome everybody who's here for the first time. It's great to have you all along, and thank you for your help with the compensation study. That's been a long time in the making. So with that, we'll adjourn.
Agatha had something.
There was one thing I forgot to mention, and it relates to your next meeting, and it's time sensitive.
Okay.
Can I rejoin? I'm sorry, I forgot to mention this. We have the Sergeant at Arms office and the Capitol Police. My understanding is before I joined, maybe several years ago, was awarded a federal grant for the installation of cameras throughout the building. And I need to brief this committee and joint rules again on what that project is, because I'm certain that the people who the composition of the joint rules committee has changed since that project was approved. And everyone needs to be rebriefed on exactly what this project is. And I want to be very thorough about it because the idea of bringing cameras into the building will bring a lot of questions up. But to reassure this committee, this is something that has already been approved by the Joint Rules Committee. The reason those cameras were never installed is because they were destroyed in the flood. So the building was wired, we were ready to go. The cameras were, all we had to do was install the cameras and they were destroyed in the flood. So Chief Polway has been working very hard to pull together all of the puzzle pieces, working with Kevin, working with FEMA to figure out if we can replace these cameras. The answer is we can. However, with the change of administration on the federal level, there is now a 30-day window to actually purchase those cameras. I think after 30 days, and I'm going to turn to JFO, I think after 30 days, we lose our opportunity to purchase the cameras. And this is something like a $200,000 project.
The record Scott Moore, Joint Fiscal Office. The 30-day window essentially is, Kevin, correct me if I'm wrong, as to when it starts. But the vendor who would be able to buy the cameras basically has a price point that's good for 30 days.
Okay.
So when would the 30 days have run?
I asked Chief Polway to get that back. I don't know if Kevin might know.
I want to say we're about 3 or 4 days into that.
And did insurance?
Insurance and FEMA are ultimately going to cover the costs.
So this in and of itself is a whole topic for JLMC to discuss, and I don't mean to get into it now, except to say that it's possible and likely that we'll be coming back to request this group to reconvene within the next 30 days. So I just wanted to share that with the group.
So we'll send scheduling emails out to you once we have that nailed down. Okay, thank you again. So